Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Friday the 20th of February. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, US President Donald Trump says Iran has 2 weeks to make a deal as American forces gather in the Middle East.
Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's arrest sparks a crisis in the British royal family as a police investigation continues into the former prince.
Plus, Christine Lagarde says serving out her full term as President of the European Central Bank is her baseline.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The United States is continuing its military build-up in the Middle East as President Trump says Iran has 10 to 15 days to agree a deal over its nuclear program. Speaking to reporters on Air Force One, Trump was asked what happens if no agreement is reached.
I'm not going to talk to you about that, but we're either going to get a deal or it's going to be unfortunate for them.
The US President was speaking as the United States now has more forces in the Middle East than at any point since the Iraq War. Donald Trump's use of the military in his second term has been characterised by short engagements, including previously bombing Iran. But US former Deputy National Security Advisor Megan O'Sullivan says these troop movements don't follow that pattern.
This is the largest military buildup of American force and firepower that the world has seen since 2003. And I think it really raises questions about what kind of action could the Trump administration be preparing.
O'Sullivan adds the lack of clarity is driving insecurity. The risk of a wider conflict sent stocks lower and extended a surge in oil, with Brent crude rising above $72 a barrel.
The US president's latest warnings come as Bloomberg has learned that the UK has not granted permission for its bases to be part of any strike on Iran. The Times first reported Britain's lack of approval due to concerns over international law. Donald Trump spoke by telephone to the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Tuesday about Iran. The following day, the US president changed his public stance on the Chagos Islands, which is host to the US-UK base, saying that key military bases there would be critical for any strike on Iran.
In the UK, former Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released under investigation. That's after the brother of King Charles III was arrested yesterday on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The arrest came after further details of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein emerged. The former prince has consistently denied any wrongdoing. Legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg says any decision to charge Mountbatten-Windsor could take time.
The police work really starts now. They have to look at all the documents, see what they can find out from the authorities, from the government, then take advice from the Crown Prosecution Service, and finally decide whether they have enough evidence to bring charges. That could take months.
That's legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg. King Charles III issued a statement outlining his deepest concern about the matter and promised Buckingham Palace's full and wholehearted support and cooperation with the investigating authorities.
Christine Lagarde says that she expects completing her mission as President of the European Central Bank will take until the end of her term, amid speculation that she could resign early. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, she said, quote, "The baseline is that it will take until the end of her term to achieve her goals of financial stability and protecting the euro." She also told the newspaper the World Economic Forum is, quote, "one of the many options she is considering once she leaves the central bank." Now, she declined to comment on reports in the Financial Times this week suggesting that she would step down before her term expires in October 2027. It had been reported that her early departure would give French President Emmanuel Macron time to have a say in picking her successor at the ECB before the April 2027 presidential election in France.
Bank of America is committing $25 billion of its own capital to private credit deals. It's joining a number of Wall Street firms in putting its own balance sheet behind lending in the fast-growing market. Bloomberg's Freddie Fulston has more.
The Wall Street giant is looking to tap a $1.8 trillion private credit industry that has boomed in recent years. And it's planning to originate the new deals from its existing capital markets division. However, it's one of the last big US banks to formally commit to a market that offers high risk and high returns. The industry's attracted scrutiny over valuations and the quality of lending. Shares in Blue Owl dropped on Thursday after saying it would restrict withdrawals from one of its private credit funds. In London, Freddie Fulston, Bloomberg Radio.
Nvidia is reportedly close to a new agreement with OpenAI that will downgrade its long-term $100 billion deal with the firm. The Financial Times is reporting the chip giant is near to agreeing a $30 billion equity deal to replace its bigger commitment. Now, the retreat comes as the wider market has been rattled by concerns over the health of the AI sector. Nvidia is the only member of the Mag 7 stocks that is currently posting a positive return year to date. Those are our top stories for you this morning. In terms of the markets, a 6-month high now for oil prices with Middle East risks rising. You have Brent crude futures trading at $72.15, up by 0.7%. There's also the possibility, only a possibility, that with the US Supreme Court returning from recess, there could be maybe an opinion on Trump tariffs today. Hang Seng Tech Index is dropping 2%, so the AI and tech concerns remain there in focus in parts of the market. The Kospi, though, up by 2.2%. Stock futures for Europe also surging a solid 0.4 higher this morning. The pound and euro weaker. Treasury yields, 10-year US yields flat at 4.07. Those are the markets.
In a moment, we'll bring you the latest on the US-Iran tensions, plus what former Prince Andrew's arrest means for the British royal family. But another story that caught our eye this morning, and maybe what might be my new conversation starter question: what's the best party you've ever been to? This is a fascinating trip down memory lane, I would hope, for all of us. Kate Crater's speaking to a series of CEOs, though, about the best celebrations they've been to. The answers are a mix of milestone birthdays, a charity fundraiser hosted by Ray Dalio, and more. She spoke to people including Tim Martin, the boss of Wetherspoons, who talks about going to a poolside party in Jamaica in 1977, where his father was working for Guinness. That sounded fun.
Yeah, I've met Tim Martin. I suspect he throws a very good party. Of course, he's in the hospitality industry, and most of these CEOs are. So, yeah, it was lovely. I think that this story, at the beginning, Kate talks about how it's going to make you jealous because a lot of these parties are, sound really fabulous. But as you say, I think it was just brought to mind all of the great celebrations I've been to, and maybe that we should have a few more.
Let's organise one now. We're all invited.
Yes.
I have to say, I was a semi-professional wedding guest in my 20s and 30s, and there's nothing quite like an Irish wedding. But I think my absolute apex was an Irish-Italian wedding in the south of Italy. Just beat expectations, shall we say, on so many fronts: the food, the atmosphere, everything. That was what came out top of my list.
Oh, I love it. Reminiscences. How good. Yes, definitely. We need to have a party when we're back in the same city together.
Well, we'll put a link to that story in our podcast show notes, but I want to bring you now more on our top story this morning and the latest we've heard from the United States about a potential military strike on Iran. President Trump says Tehran is up to 15 days to strike a deal now over its nuclear program. Our head of Middle East, North Africa and Russia coverage, Stuart Livingston-Wallace, joins us now for more. Stuart, good morning. It seemed earlier this week that tensions were being dialed down after the talks in Geneva. What do the US president's comments and this new deadline mean for Iran?
Yeah, good morning. I mean, I think it ratchets up the pressure and really what they're trying, or certainly what the US administration seems to be trying to do, is speed up the process. So when they came out of that second round of talks in Geneva, the idea was that Iran would have, or both sides rather, would have 2 weeks to come up with draft proposals for something, fairly substantial that they could negotiate around. This definitely seems to be trying to accelerate that process. Now, part, I think, of the incentive here is that he has an awful lot of military equipment in the region. There's more arriving. As you know, there's a second strike carrier group coming down the Mediterranean right now. And he doesn't necessarily think that he has months and months to do a long-run negotiation in the vein of what we saw with the last nuclear accord, which I think, start to finish, was about 2 years. That is not the time frame we're talking about here.
So what do we know then about what President Trump is threatening then in terms of military action? What might be the scenarios?
Well, he hasn't said anything specific beyond the rhetoric that you've seen repeatedly over the last several weeks. But moving into the realms of speculation, it could range on one end of the spectrum from a quick hit on things like, for instance, military targets. Again, that will be designed to accelerate the negotiating process and to try and get Iran to concede more points on that, particularly around the nuclear file, and perhaps to extend it to ballistic missiles and regional proxies, which are the other two big issues that Iran sort of resisted talking about, but the US and others are very keen to get addressed. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have regime change. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether you can do that with the kind of firepower they had and without boots on the ground. And then there's a whole range of scenarios in between. But again, the targets, one would assume, would be mostly military. And there are an awful lot of those to go after, as we saw with the 12-day war in June last year.
Stuart, have we heard anything from Iran since Donald Trump issued this deadline, or how should we expect them to respond?
So far, there's not been much out of them since Geneva. Obviously, they came out of those talks and said, that there'd been reasonably good progress. I think we'll watch. Friday's an important day. You have Friday prayers, and maybe there'll be some sort of communication coming out after that. And remember, also we're now in Ramadan, so typically things go a bit quieter in the region. So again, we'll be watching over the next few days to see what they will come out with. But so far, Iran has made it clear that it has no intention of capitulating. It wants a negotiation, and it really wants to focus those negotiations solely on the nuclear file. So what we're watching for is any sort of budge in those positions.
OK, we'll continue to watch then. Stuart, thank you so much for being with us. Stuart Livingston-Wallace is our head of Middle East, North Africa and Russia coverage as we see oil prices continuing to ratchet higher over the worries in the Middle East. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
Now, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released from police custody without charge following his arrest on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The investigation into the former prince is continuing. His arrest heaps further embarrassment on Britain's royal family following years of lurid allegations about ties with Jeffrey Epstein that Andrew has consistently denied. Our reporter Tiwa Adebayo joins us now for more. Tiwa, first of all, what do we know about the investigation?
Well, so far, as you mentioned, we know that he was arrested yesterday on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The latest is that he has now been released from police custody under investigation. That was yesterday evening. The Thames Valley Police have confirmed the release of a man in his 60s in Norfolk, but as is per the national guidance in the UK, they themselves have not named him. But in their most recent update about the investigation, the police force also said that it has concluded its searches in Norfolk, where the former prince currently resides on the Sandringham estate. But also the BBC was reporting yesterday that they are still searching the former prince's former home, which is Royal Lodge in Berkshire. He moved out just a few weeks ago onto the Sandringham estate. So as of right now, it seems investigations are ongoing, but Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released from police custody.
What has the royal family said?
Well, the royal household and the king have released a number of statements over the last few months, and that's really as the speculation surrounding Andrew has grown. The overarching theme has really been support for law enforcement and acknowledgement of victims, and we saw that in the most recent statement from the king yesterday. He said he learnt of the news of the arrest with the deepest concern, but reiterated that the authorities have the family's full and wholehearted support in the investigation. He also said that the law must take his course. We did see the king at a public engagement yesterday. As this news was breaking, he was present at a London Fashion Week show alongside Queen Camilla as well. But of course, this isn't the first time that the royals have spoken out. We heard the last statement just earlier this month. That was following the release of that tranche of files from the US Department of Justice relating relating to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And in that statement, the King also said that the family were ready to support Thames Valley Police in the event that they were approached. We have heard from other households within the royal establishment. The Prince and Princess of Wales also showed their support for the victims of Epstein earlier this month, saying they were deeply concerned by the continuing revelations. So we've definitely heard a lot from the royal family about this matter, which I would add is quite uncharacteristic for the royal establishment in the UK.
Now, Andrew has consistently denied wrongdoing, but he had stopped undertaking royal duties following a 2019 TV interview.
Yes, it was announced following that BBC interview in November 2019, which did have quite a negative reception around the world, that Andrew would step back from public duties for the foreseeable future. And that was really the beginning of a process of him sort of being distanced from the working royal family in the UK. And it culminated really towards the end of last year in October, when we heard that Andrew was voluntarily giving up his royal titles, namely the Duke of York title, and then what followed was the formal stripping of his titles by the King. And it's interesting, in the statement that the King released recently about this, he referenced unprecedented actions that he's taken out of concern for this situation. It seems one of those was the stripping of the titles formally, something which has never really been seen before in the UK.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.